One is the population of the veterans in the county, and second is an equal distribution to each of the counties, with Gilliam, Sherman, and Wheeler treated as a single county. And then each county also provides funding for their county budgets. So the combination of those two funding sources is key to the success of these programs. As a way of highlighting some of these things, we've got about 303,000 veterans across the state. As of September 30th, 2017, we rely on the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs data for that figure. And then for the pass-through dollars, the fact of the matter is the lottery funding that we've gotten has enabled us to double the pass-through funding that we provide to the counties across the state. And that has actually been a wonderful thing. It's been transformational in terms of the help that the county VSOs can provide to our veterans. And it's also provided some challenges, quite frankly, in some cases, because as you can imagine, you budget, the county budgets for a certain amount, and they do an annual budget. And then we at the state level operate on a biennium. And so the cost is a little bit of lack of synchronicity, if you will, with the funding. Because between the annual versus biennium budgeting cycles, and then the fact that with only a little bit of heads up, the county's got this great influx of twice the amount of funding that they had ever received before. They've really been struggling in some cases to spend all of the money that they've received. They've been extraordinarily grateful, and again, they talk to us frequently in our statewide Veteran Services Office on how they can spend the money. They're being cautious. They want to make sure they're spending it within the rules, but they're also struggling with spending all the money within the required time. So, for instance, those counties that have not yet completely spent the money that they've received, we've advised that they carry forward into the next year that extra money that they haven't spent. So we've had conversations like that between ODVA and the counties on a fairly frequent basis.
Madam Director, a couple of things. As I understand, the first year of any new program is always a challenge, especially
Absolutely.
with the misalignment of budgets. Most counties, I believe, are doing the very best they can.
Most counties are doing, all of the counties are doing the best they can.
What I hope is the message moving forward after this first year is that now that they know the money is there, that A, they will spend what they need to spend appropriately, and B, that there will never, ever, ever be supplanting. And that when that occurs, moving forward, if it occurs, if statute needs to change, we can do that. If accounting needs to get better, we can do that. But that a clear message that it is additional money, not money to be, shall we say, put into a different color of money and spent a different way. I think that's a message we need to be very clear, because we promised the taxpayers with this lottery that it would be on top of, not as a side up.
And that's a message that we have consistently sent to many counties numerous times. So thank you for that support.
I know you have. Just sometimes when you're out there, you can say, and the legislature said I need to be careful about it. Just throwing it out there.
That conversation too. Thank you.
Sure. Yes, sir.
So I want to go back to something you said, and it sort of ties to, counties who say, well, we don't have money, and of course, I think we should be allocating them more money for this. But you mentioned that $2.8 billion in benefits annually is the sort of new number, and there's some folks on the committee that are new and folks who are new to the conversation. That's a $500 million increase from when we started this conversation. It was 2.3 in 2013 when we started gathering signatures for Measure 96. So in just really nerdy math, a $500 million increase is $1 billion in a biennium. And if you said that a third of that came back as sort of money that was directly going to be assessed for income tax purposes, then at the effective average tax rate in the state, that extra $500 million is generating us $25 million in general fund revenue. So when I see a cuts budget coming from the governor's office on veterans, and it is a cut from the original 15-17 biennium, it's 10 million and it was 13 back then. So as far as I'm concerned, it's still a cut. That $500 million that we have worked hard as counties and legislators to fund is actually net revenue positive back to the general fund. And so I think it's really important that this budget's held accountable to voters and taxpayers. I mean, that's just really back of the cocktail napkin math, but the reality is this is a revenue positive thing for our general fund, and the budget does not reflect that this year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with my colleague because, that was cut $10 million. So level of service, keep in mind, the people who will be here, keep in mind that level of service is $10 million off from last time because they cut that budget by 10 million. We clawed back 7 million, I believe, didn't we, Mr. Chair?
8.5.
8.5. It's still short. And it's still, no matter how you cut it, it's short. Don't let that happen. Don't let that Ways and Means get carried away with that stuff, because make sure you add that on to the level of service. And the other thing I have for you is for Southern Oregon, someone told me that they were told by their veteran service officers that they are no longer eligible after 10 years for benefits. Now, obviously, there's been a miscommunication. Either the veteran didn't understand it or the VSO didn't relay it properly, but that's not true. So I'd sure like to see a memo going out to the VSO saying, be careful of how you explain those services.
And to Representative Esquivel's point, there is, right now is not a surprise to you, with the ongoing GI Bill kerfuffle, there is less than great trust in USDVA on any of its programs right now. So it might be worth whatever communicative process you have at the beginning of the year, just to emphasize that if there are questions, you're there to make sure that they're there, clarifying that veterans benefits once awarded, unless adjudicated otherwise, are continuing. I know from my personal experience there are a number of questions coming up with whether or not in the recent tax reform bill veterans issues were affected, which I don't think they were, but there's a number of questions coming about how the USDVA budget is being provided. That's not your bailiwick. Unfortunately, it's your customers that have the same questions. So just a thought on that. Yes, Representative Meek.
Thank you, Chair. Back to the county VSO dollars that were going, that they're over and above what they were expecting. Is there any process, I'm not sure if each county is autonomous, but is there any process in which you can work with them to have them establish wish lists that if they do get these additional dollars, where would be the best way to implement them and spend them to provide better services? Because I know each county will be different, but I think that'd be a better way for them to prepare and plan for any funding so that they can implement them and allocate them properly.
That's an excellent point. My understanding is that when ODVA first learned about the influx that was coming our way, that the counties were given a heads up and were asked for their wish list, just that. And so all of the counties did provide a wish list, and that was part of the tracking and monitoring that ODVA's been doing to kind of check in with the counties over time to see if they were actually implementing and spending the money on the wish list items. And so that's exactly what we do, and we'll continue to do that sort of thing.
Great, thank you.